Welcome to People Love Process. This content is also different than my normal deconstructive process. We're going to focus on 5 critical stages of a systematic creative process. I've set up chapter breaks for each of these stages so you can easily watch them at your own pace. Now, some of the content has appeared in one of my LinkedIn Learning courses, and that is because I originally developed this for a How Design Live presentation that I gave in Denver, but only had about 45 minutes to go through everything, so I had to somewhat rush the process. But in this movie, I'm going to take my time so that way you can really kind of soak it in. If you attended my session at How, just email me using the address in the description below this video, and I'll provide the exercise files to you for free. We have a lot to cover, so let's dive into it. So the first category we're going to be covering is drawing designs. Now, every time I speak about design and creativity, I always include drawing. Drawing is what every designer should do. Do you have to become a full-blown illustrator? Absolutely not. But drawing, the skill of drawing, is going to improve your design. And I think the best argument for that is legendary designer Saul Bass. And there's a great video. If you go to YouTube and you search Saul Bass and his opinion on drawing, he puts out the best argument on why designers should draw. So make sure to check that out. But I love his quote because it encapsulates the importance of drawing in the context of design. And that quote is, "Design is thinking made visual." So to get that tangible idea out of your head and put it on paper, or if you're drawing digitally, to draw it out on a iPad, for example, it's the same cognitive benefits as analog drawing. Now, I learned how to draw in analog, so I kind of prefer that. But my daughter, Savannah, she does all of her drawing on her iPad, and the app she loves to use is called Clip Studio Pro. She doesn't even use an Adobe software. And it's actually an awesome program, so you might want to check that out if you like drawing on your iPad. So to demonstrate the principles in this content, we're going to focus on brand-centric ideas because we need them to be somewhat simplified to get through everything without making this super long. And so what I want to just review is that what we're covering in these 5 stages, we're not going to go over the research and the kind of gathering of information and kind of vetting a client and really getting to understand who they are, what they do, and more importantly, who their target audience is that they're trying to communicate with. I'm going to assume you've done that, because that's where you're going to draw your information from, and you're going to start making these kind of conceptual connecting of the dots to come up with original ideas. So that's important. We're not really covering that. We're focusing on the visual identity aspect of design. I'm going to assume you have that in place, but I'm going to use 2 projects that kind of demonstrate it. To demonstrate all the principles as we go through. So the first one has to do with a company that develops games for role-playing games. And when you think of role-playing games, you might think of the 20-sided dice, like this one. Well, they had taken this and they had associated one of these, by the way, all 20 sides are perfect triangles, but for whatever reason, they isolated this shape in the 20-sided dice and kind of locked that up in their existing logo. And this is what the existing logo was. And I just thought it was an awkward way to utilize that type of shape. Doesn't really fit too well, kind of looks forced together, and just doesn't go very well with the existing typography. So our challenge is to improve this, but I knew they wanted somehow to keep the dice intact as part of their visual identity. And I figured out how we could do that. But more importantly, I think it makes more sense to view the dice by rotating 180 degrees, and you get a perfect triangle in the middle. So we're going to be basically playing off of a triangle shape as we solve that problem for that specific project. The other project has to do, well, think of farms, think of cows, a dairy farm, and it's going to have to do with milk. Now, there's a lot of different ways to draw now. When I started in this industry, there was no digital drawing. Wacom didn't exist. You drew everything in analog and you scanned it in, and that's kind of the way I prefer to still work. I like having those tangible assets after I'm done drawing, but there's a lot of methods for drawing now. Of course, I prefer drawing in analog. I love mono pencils and black wing pencils. I love drawing more precisely with my mechanical pencil, but that said, it is fun to draw digitally on a Wacom. I've done illustrations that way, and it also works really well with like an Apple Pencil on an iPad using a variety of apps out there, Procreate, Clip Studio Pro, like my daughter uses, and a lot of other ones. So whichever way you prefer to draw, that's what I want you to do. And again, this isn't about becoming an illustrator. It's about leveraging the skill of drawing that improves cognition and the solving of creative ideas. So it all starts with thumbnail drawing. This is the hardest thing to get across to students. So I taught at a local design program for about 7 years, and the hardest thing to get them to do was, okay, sketch out ideas, and they'd bring me like one or two, and I go, no, you need to really struggle with this before you can discover a few that have potential that you can move forward in. And that's what I do when I'm creating brand marks. This one, I'm specifically focusing on utilizing a triangle for the brand mark. So you can see all these things that I've drawn out. And the ones I chose to go with to build out in final form are these. And that's what we're going to be covering, is some of the methodology to move forward with in doing so. Now, the other project regarding a dairy product is this was my sketch on the left, was about the original size in in proportion to an actual pencil, so it's pretty small. And I just blew it up, and I didn't even bother redrawing it because most of these shapes I'm going to create with just simple shapes in Adobe Illustrator, just to show you, you don't have to be an absolutely perfect drawer. As long as you think in shapes, you can work in shapes, and you can create some pretty cool art. And of course, I use a flatbed scanner to scan my drawings in so I can bring them into Illustrator and use it as a roadmap for vector building. So that's what I wanted to go over in this one, is just to encourage you to embrace drawing. And even if you don't think you're a good drawer, just embrace that fear, and eventually it'll become fun, and that's where it really becomes enjoyable. The next stage I want to get into is building vector art. This comes down to craftsmanship, and that's what we want to focus on. Now, the drawing you did should be able to guide your building efforts. Does it need to be perfect? No. This is a simple doodle. I'm trying to capture the essence of a triangle, but it doesn't have to be a perfect triangle, because we have shape building tools like the hexagon tool we're going to use in a second. And then the T, it's not even completely even. It's close enough because we're going to build with precise methods in Illustrator. So usually I scan mine in, I place it into Illustrator like this, and then I simply go to my transparency palette and I set it to about 15%, maybe 20% like this. And then I simply lock the layer just so I don't move it. And then on a layer on top, I start building my shapes. Now, to build a triangle, there is no triangle tool. Let's go ahead and just delete this. We'll go over here and grab the polygon tool, because if you go over here, snap on the guide, and you start bringing it out like this, you can use the arrow keys to just simplify it down into a triangle. If you hold shift, it'll lock it at 90 degrees like that. And now we have a perfect triangle. I'll just go ahead and bring this down like this, and then we'll just scale it up to match the height we want to get like that. So not too hard. Now we do have the rectangle tool over here. So those are no-brainers to create like this. And on this one, I'm just going to select both of these, go to Pathfinder, and we're going to go to Unite just to fuse them together. And a cool little feature that hasn't always been in Illustrator, because when Illustrator adds little things, they don't always bother to announce it. And it is almost like discovered by the users. Like, I hadn't even heard of this until I saw a video and I go, seriously? Why didn't they say something about it? But if you use the direct selection, click both of these anchors like this, you hit the S key, which in my opinion, this is unintuitive. You hit the S key, that's going to change it to the scale tool. And then with the scale tool icon, which is this little target, you just click on the anchor and drag, and it will mirror side to side. Now, if you hit shift, it'll lock it into 90 degrees like this, but that's how that works. So you can do something like that, which I think is kind of cool, and they probably should have told more people about that. We're going to go ahead and go here, because on this we can use the corner widget here, and as long as you have smart guides turned on, it will tell you what the analytics are in terms of the size. So if you want to get it, you know, I think that's pretty much good. We just want to round it like that, and I think that looks good. Let's go ahead and zoom in, because not everything needs to be built with the pen tool. Like, we can build this with easy shape building tools. The more you think in shapes, the easier it gets. We're going to use an older tool, the scissor tool, and I'm doing that because I just want to cut this and cut this. I'll select this piece and just get rid of it. And on this one here, I'll go ahead and cut it here and cut it here. And this middle part here, I'll just delete. Then I'm just going to select this, drag it over until it snaps, and notice it's not snapping. And if you ever run into it where it, well now there, if I stop, go past it, then I start dragging back, it'll snap. That's the snapping bug that, for whatever reason, their engineers can't fix, even though I pointed it out since CS6. So it's kind of annoying. They told me it's almost been a year now, last November, that they had fixed it. And so I started playing with it, and it seemed like they did, but they ultimately didn't. I ended up running into it again. So we're going to snap those, because I'm just going to select these two corners here, drag select with direct selection, and go Command J, which kind of welds those together, because right now they're just independent corners, or anchor points. So we'll select these two anchor points, we'll go Command J. That means this whole shape is one continuous path, and that's what we want. Now, sometimes when you shape build, it'll do this. It fused them together, but it made redundant anchor points. Let me undo that here. If you go under the Pathfinder menu, option menu, and you go to Pathfinder options, notice they have a remove redundant points feature, but it doesn't actually remove all redundant points. I just want to point that out. Have this on by default, because as I added those triangles, fused them together, it won't add it on work like that, but when you're shape building, you're going to run into it. And you can't tell by just looking at Illustrator's art selected. There's nothing that indicates you don't have any warning saying, excuse me, you have some redundant points, but you do. If I go to a plugin by Astute Graphics called PathScribe, it says there's 15 points here. And if I counted the points visually, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There should be only 13, but it says there's 15. So we have 2 redundant anchor points. On this, it's easy, but the more complex your art, you wouldn't be able to count and figure out how many you should have. So with these, I'll just slide them over like this, and this one slide it over like this. Because they're on a 90 degree, I can select both of them and just go minus and it will remove them. Now, if we select our art, it's only 13. So you have to pay attention to that, or it might cause troubles down the end if you do certain things. So I just wanted to point that out. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I don't want this to remain magenta. I just build in magenta because I find it easier. We're going to color this black. We're going to go to stroke, and we'll set this because I want this to be kind of thick. So we'll go 11 like that, but I don't want rounded. I'm going to go pointed like that because I want it to come to a point when it goes out here like that. I've always wished they would allow you on one path, because this is considered one path, to select a corner and apply the round to it, and it would only apply to that one corner, but it universally applies to all corners. Why they can't do that, I don't know, but it just does. So I just wanted to point that out. So once we have it set to the thickness we want on this stroke, let me zoom out just a little bit. We're a little tight here. There, that's a little more breathing room. We're going to keep building on this. So I want to go ahead and let's see, we'll go ahead and expand this because we don't want it to remain a path. So we'll go object, we'll go path, and we'll go outline stroke like that. Boom. So we've outlined it. This is where I'll probably go in, and you can use the corner widget if you wanted to, like here. Since we wanted to kind of round those, we can do it after the fact just by selecting these two. And actually, let's go ahead and select these because I want these to be the same round. And this is the only reason I don't use the corner widget for every type of rounding, because I'm not sure if I want it to, it's hard to see it with the corner widget being so kind of overtly in the position of where this is happening. So at times it's hard to see it. This is kind of large enough so we'll be able to notice how much the rounding is. Something like that I think looks good. And now I want this to be one continuous line, but I want to play up on this. So this is where I'll go in, and yes, they've developed intertwine, but intertwine works if you have two different color shapes and you can highlight those shapes to make it look like it's overlapping. But bottom line, intertwine is a half-baked feature because you still have to build it clean manually. It doesn't do it for you. And this, I want it all one color, black, so it wouldn't work on this. It wouldn't show any kind of intertwine. So we're not going to use that. We're just going to use simple shapes like this. I can select these shapes, select the shape of the brand mark itself, and we can go minus front like that. And notice these anchors it adds here. These are the type of things Illustrator isn't smart enough to know you wouldn't want this. So we would just direct select these like that. We go up here, because they're on a straight line, we can just hit this and get rid of them. So I'll go over on this one. We have some here, and we have these two here, and I just remove it like that. I think we got everything we should remove. And so now, if you go to your appearance panel, it's going to revert to a group every time you use Pathfinder. So I have a keyboard shortcut set up. I covered that in the previous movie on how I set up keyboard shortcuts, but that setup is F7 key on my end. If you don't have keyboard shortcuts, you would just have to always go to Object, go down to Compound, and go over to Make. Notice I have F7, so I never do that, but that's how you find it. I just hit F7. If you watch this, it'll just change to a compound path. So it's really nice. I've used that for years. So let's go ahead and turn off our sketch. We don't need that. And on this one, I'm just going to select this. I've inset it from the original triangle. We don't want the stroke. We want it to be this fill color. I'll cut it, select the brand mark, paste behind, Command B, and that looks pretty good. So this is the brand mark I designed for one of the directions that I sketched out. And you can see from my sketch, it was rough, but you can use precise shape building methods to create it to work really well. So let's jump to the next thing. And this is the moo mark. So this is the size that I drew it at. And I can just go ahead and zoom in on this because it's kind of small. So we'll zoom in here. And I'm just going to turn on this layer because if you think in shapes, what shapes could I just automatically start creating using any of the shape tools here? Well, you could do a lot of elliptical shapes. So you can see this. Now, does it completely match my artwork exactly? Well, my artwork is pretty rough. So I took some liberty with this. But if you look at the arch of the head, I made that with this shape. The arch of the ear, I made it with this elliptical shapes. The spots are just elliptical shapes. The moon, the detail on the moon, the legs, and the top and bottom of the body are just all elliptical shapes. So if you think in shapes, it makes it easier to work out your artwork because I can select shapes like this and then minus front out of this shape to get the in moon. There's no reason to touch the pen tool. So think in shapes. Thinking in shapes is the way you can solve so many issues. So if we focus on a few of these, like if I go here, let's go ahead and zoom in on this one since we're looking at his nose. Actually, let's first take this wedge shape, which is another shape I created because I can take that, select this big oval because I want that to guide the back of his head. I can go intersect and it creates most of the head shape. Now, I want his nose not to be a perfect elliptical shape, an oval. So if I go here and I select both of these anchors and I hit the S key again, not only does it work with moving anchors, it also works with grabbing the Bezier handles and pulling it. So notice we're getting more of a squircle type shape. Well, it's not even a square, but I don't know what they call this, a squoval. Since it's based off of an oval, but it's an imperfect shape, but that looks a lot better. Then I can select the nostrils, the shape on his nose, and just rotate it to be in kind of not the perspective, but kind of align with my drawing where I want it to go. We can take this shape and making sure it's on top of the lip shape, and that would help us just create the ear shape like this. Let's go ahead and zoom out just a little bit. Of course, the moon, the smaller circle can punch right out. And by the way, I use the term punch because I used Macromedia Freehand for 15 years, and their Boolean methods, which is the technology behind Pathfinder, they called their version of minus front was called punch, which makes sense. You're punching through a shape. Adobe engineers thought a good name would be minus front, which doesn't even make sense to me, but there you go. We're going to take the body shape here. We're going to take these elliptical shapes, basically one huge donut, and we'll just go intersect. Intersect is wherever they overlap becomes the new shape. And if you start thinking like this, you can build a lot of content and make it work really good. Now, the one thing is on the nose here. If I go here and I go object, offset path, and we're going to set a tolerance because I'm going to use the same tolerance everywhere, and you can preview it like this, like that. Now I did that because I don't want this pointed part sticking out down here, and we're going to create gaps in between these shapes. You know, so that'll be how the head looks, and it defines that edge of the nose, etc. So that's how we're going to be handling this. If we go ahead and turn on this layer, you can continue to think in shapes and build with shapes. We used all rectangles here. This is that same 4-point gap we put offsetting from the nose. We're going to use that consistently to keep the bottom edge of the horn that same gap distance away from the top edge. It's very iconic in terms of the principles here. And if you think in shapes and you keep your continuity intact, such as these gaps, it really kind of coheses everything together and it looks nice. So we're going to take this rectangle, we're just going to kind of extend it a bit. We'll go ahead and take this corner and this corner, and I'm going to use the corner widget here, and we'll take this and I'll use this one. So you can see these two rectangle shapes are going to end up making a nice horn shape here. So I'll go ahead and go minus front. So we have this horn here. I think that looks pretty good. We're going to select this in now after we've created this in, and we'll just round this like that. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to go offset, and we'll use the same amount. We don't have to worry about it wigging out. That's a mitering issue. That doesn't matter. We're just paying attention to as it goes out here, and you can see it's starting to bend a little, and I don't want to do that. So I'm going to take this shape that we used to establish that gap, take this shape. Oops. Actually, let's take this, and I'm just going to move it in. I don't want it to extend out. Select these two, and we'll go unite. You can see it's added an extra anchor. So as I go, I always just remove those like that. And that way I can take this, making sure it's on front, take the head of I almost called them a deer, the head. My wife made fun of me one time because we were going down the highway, and I go, hey, check out the deer out there. I don't know why I said deer. It was a cow. My wife reminds me of that every time we drive by that same area. So nice little side story. Let's go ahead and punch that out like that. That looks good. I can even take the ear now and fuse it in with the head. Again, once I have a point I don't need, I try to clean up as I go like this. And now I can take this antler here, and I'm going to go ahead and actually, let's make a copy of it. I'm going to go Command-C, Command-F, or just hit the F3 key, which creates a copy of that shape like that. And I'll go to the Reflect tool. I'll click here, and I'll click here. It'll reflect it over like this. And then I'll just slide this over like this, and I'm trying to find a nice happy balance of how far I want it to go over. Something like, that's pretty close. I'm going to go over just a little further. Something like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to take this, and we'll bring this to the front, select both of these, and go minus front. So that way we get the horn on the other one. You can see if you look at my drawing behind this, is it exactly like my drawing? No, it doesn't have to be. That's just to kind of guide your creative process. Rather, is it easier to build these things with the sketch or without the sketch? Well, for me, I like having the sketch because it reminds me what I need to work on next. And if it needs to be more precise, I draw it precise and use it. But all that said, this is how you can do simple shape building. So when it's all said and done, these are all the base shapes like this. And ultimately, I'm going to fill in the raw color. And on this color, I think it'd look better with a brown and a nice blue like this. And this is, oh, by the way, I should go back and show you one thing. So once I get to this point where I have all these shapes, all the base shapes created, and I might not have knocked through these gaps to create the hooves on the legs, etc. But once I get this far, I'll select everything and I'll group it. I'll clone it, Command-C, Command-F, and I'll drag it to my X layer because I always like having backups of my build process I can go back to and grab if I needed. But this is what we ended up on, so we're going to go ahead and move to the next stage. Let's move on to stage 3, and that focuses on choosing type and colors. Now, I'm going to be the first one to admit that my process for choosing type isn't anything super unique. It took me about 7 years to get around to organizing all of my fonts into style categories. But once I did that, man, it made life so much easier. So what I do as I'm thinking or looking at a brand mark I created, I start thinking about the typography that might go good with it. And so all of my categories are organized in my font library by style category. This specific font is within my Google fonts. As you can see down here, this is my fonts folder and then Google fonts. But I have all kinds of style categories, black letter, condensed, extended, sans serif, might be novelty kind of stuff. It's all different kinds of categories. So I'm so used to thinking that way now. I know exactly where to go to check it out. I don't keep them all open at all one time, although I do have favorites. I use a program called FontBase. For years, I used a Suitcase. Now I can't even Pro or whatever it was called. But FontBase is really simple. That's what I like. And I have font categories. Of course, I have my favorite sans and my favorite serifs and condensed. And I organize a Google fonts, or maybe it's project specific. So Tactic Action is this one, so that's the ones I have loaded that I want to explore for that. I have other clients like Ames up here that I use on their projects, mainly packaging, JFO's another one, so on and so forth. But if you're not sure about what font manager to use, I can highly recommend FontBase. Works really great. So I go in, I turn on or load fonts into a project folder for what I'm working on. And then simply inside of Illustrator, I just start typing out the name of the business, company, or service that I'm branding. And I just try to figure out the aesthetic that's going to go good with the brand mark. And I try to kind of pair that font with the aesthetic of the brand mark. What's going to reinforce it? What's going to work great with it? And that's all I'm doing here. And ultimately, for the type pairing on this design, I'm using Montserrat Bold. Montserrat is the name of a battle from way back. Also, an area where the U.S. troops fought the Germans during World War II. I believe that was Montserrat Monastery, like some hill up there. It was in one of the only reason I know that because it was in whatever game that was I used to play way back when. It was a fun map, by the way. Okay, let's get back on topic here. So I have this typeface, and I've converted it to Paz, obviously, but Montserrat Bold is, you can get this on Google if you like the typeface. And what I tend to do is I like to customize a typeface to make it look closer to what I have it in the brand mark. And so that's all I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on this because I like, much like how I have the angles here, I want my angles to also, we'll select these two, we'll hit, I think on this one, I'm going to use the nudge key here, and I'm just going to nudge it 1, 2, 3. And we'll do this one 1, 2, 3. By the way, depending on what settings you have for your nudge keys, it might do less or it might do more. I have mine set for 1 point. As much as I think that's okay, I think the way I'm going to handle this is I'm going to go ahead and go to my graphic styles. I'm going to select one that's, let's do 0.25. And I'm going to create a shape that's the same angle as the A because I just think this is going to look better. And I'm just going to bring it out, snap it there. I'll clone it, go to the reflect tool, reflect it over. I'll snap it there, slide it up like this. So as much as I can avoid using the pen tool, I just use shapes to do most of my editing. And by the way, I'm going to go ahead and bring this and purposely overlap it so we don't run into that issue where it likes to add extra anchor points. We'll select these. We'll go to Pathfinder. I'm going to go to Unite. This is going to default to a group. So I hit my F7 keyboard shortcut to get the compound path, select these shapes, go minus front, and I think that looks pretty good. And then I want to round these to mimic the rounding in this T. It doesn't have to be obviously exactly the same, but oops, it'd help if I grab the right tool. Let's grab the direct selection. Then we get access. I don't want these really large though, like maybe just barely, something like that. That looks good. And since we did one, we can just clone it, bring it over here, and we'll just replace the other T because we want to keep this consistent like this. And I'll go through and I'll adjust the mitering if I think I need to. But overall, I think that helps. Let's go and zoom out a little bit. I think that helps balance these two, and I think that's going to work. I obviously would select these. I go Unite, make sure, again, it's a compound, and I think that'll pair up nicely with that brand mark. So on this one, it's pretty straightforward, but I always try to do some kind of modification on the logo type, just so it's not distinctly a typeface you can just type out and it looks exactly like the brand mark. And of course, on this one, I would have secondary type and we'd color that, the nice secondary brand color there like that. Now, on the other one for Moomy, it's a little more comical. So I'm keeping that in mind as I'm doing type exploration to figure out. And the one I settled on is this. I just think that would be go really great with the pairing on the aesthetic I have going in the mark. So this is the one I'm going to use. And so on the methodology for something like this, it might, how do I put it? It might offend those who are type purists because I tend to break the rules because if I think it's going to look better, then I don't care. I'll do it because it's going to look better in my opinion. So I'm going to just go ahead and select the rectangle tool, make sure we're on the right layer. I'm going to snap to the top of this M and just drag it over like that. Let's go ahead and just focus on that so you can really see what I'm doing here. Zoom in. I'm doing that just to find kind of the X height of the M. These are lowercase, and I like the lowercase letter forms better than the uppercase for the L and the K. And I'm kind of mixing and matching what I think looks best, not exactly what the typeface itself would recommend, if that makes any sense. So here we have this. So I'm going to go ahead and just extend this until it's about, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I want to lower, I'm going to make a copy of this. And I'm going to go ahead and bring it over here because I want to overlap something like that. I'm going to take this and just squash it. Yeah, that looks good. And then this one, I'll go right about there. I think I'm going to bring it down a bit and extend it out a bit like that. But I don't want this a perfect oval. So again, I'm going to select both anchors, hit the S key, and go to the Bezier curves. And we're going to make this a squoval. I think that's what we decided to call them. Like that. That looks good. These two, I want to go ahead and just trim the tops. And I know somebody is watching this going, what? Please don't do that. Well, I'm going to do it. There we go. I just think that just looks cool that way. Now the O's, I like the lowercase O's better than the uppercase O's. So we'll go here. You can see I use graphic styles quite a bit. I'm going to snap on the top of the I and the base of the M there. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to group it, select the M, and I'm going to align it to the middle like that. And all I'm going to do is just increase the height. That looks pretty good, but I want them to be wider. So I'm going to extend this over kind of like that. We'll get rid of that. That was just to guide us. I just wanted the height because you want this to go above the flat parts of the other letters like this. And if I snap to this, you can see it goes beyond the bottom and the top just because it'll look too small if you don't do that when you're working with typography. So I think that looks pretty good. So I'll select this, go to Pathfinder, I'll go Unite. Let's go and bring this up so we can see what we're doing. And it's a group, make it a compound. I'll select the word milk, Unite, make that a compound. And I think that looks pretty good. Next thing I want to do, though, is I want to go ahead and kind of stack these. So I'll do this. I think I'm going to color milk brown, and we'll make moo the blue like that. Like that. They're pretty, actually, I thought I'd scale this, but I don't know. I think that looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and move it up, kind of like this. And what I don't do on a visual mark like this, if I go like this, you can see we have all this extra space up here. So if I just focused on this to align it, and I go to align, I go center, well, it's going to make a gap down here. And I don't want to completely, I just don't think that's exactly where it should go. So I tend to overlap the artwork and try to find the optical balance of this. And I think if the type is somewhat right around here, it might be going down somewhere about there, then I'll drag it over. And I think that looks good together. And by the way, this typeface is called 8 Heavy, kind of a cool name, like that. And that's how I would figure out the typography for these two designs. Now, up to this point, all I'm using is raw colors. It's a generalized idea of what those colors are, but I haven't locked it into anything. And that's kind of what I want to focus on next. So I always establish my black and white. I always try to design a logo that works in black and white because that's one of the brand assets I deliver. But a systematic process, here's another direction that I came up with on this project. Start off with the drawing, doesn't have to be perfect. I built it using strokes, as you can see here, and then would expand them and unite them together, and this would give me my brand mark. So in the process of coloring, I always work out raw colors. And so if I select this color over here, and I select this color or this gray color, what's the difference between the palette on the left, whether I have red selected or gray selected, or the palette on the right, whether it's gray selected or red selected? Well, optically, visually speaking, they look identical, but they're not identical. Let's say I wanted to change this. If I select it, you can see the color swatch up here is selected. So if I go in here and I go, you know, I think this would be a lot better if I, who knows, let's say I change it to more of an orangish color. So I drag this down till it's 45 like that. And maybe I bump this up to 100 and I go 0 here. Maybe we'll put more red into it, like 65 like that. And I think that looks good, but my swatch is changing color, as you can see, but not my artwork. Why is that? Well, I can click it like this, click these, all these shapes, and I can apply this. But then later, if I decide I want to change that color, I can't just change my swatch because my artwork won't change. This is where global colors come in. And if you have watched other content on my channel, you'll notice I always use global colors. Why is that? Because this palette was no different visually than the one on the left. The only difference was these are global colors. If I select this, you can see it shows what swatch. If I select this, it shows what swatch. But again, over here with the gray, if I select it, it'll show that swatch, but if I change it, it won't. So I just want to point that out. So if, let's say I decide I want this to change this dark gray, I think this would look better if we just have a dark blue, and we'll remove some of the black. So maybe it's something like that. Maybe a little darker. We'll go 65 like that. And then I wanted to change the red. I can just click into the red. Instead of being orange, I think it might look better if it's like a lime green, kind of like that. Notice I didn't have to touch my artwork, but my artwork changed to align with those new colors. So it's a good habit to get in to using global colors. Why is that? Because there's certain things you can only do with global colors. One thing is tints. If you look at this base color here, this is the base color purple. And you can see I have it selected. You can see the denoted white triangle in the bottom right-hand corner. That denotes that it's a global swatch. This is the base color. I have a darker hue of the base color, creating the outline of this 20-sided die. But these colors here, well, no swatch is selected. Why is that? Because if we go to the color palette, this is the base color, and it's 100% value. T represents tints. But this color is 85% value. This is 60% value of that base color, and this is 30% value. So if we go over to, go back to swatches, we go to the example on the right. If I select this, notice it's not a global color. So I want to go in on this dark one. I'd even make this, even though we're not doing tints, I'd make this a global color. Let's go ahead and colorize that. But on the red, all these elements of the base color red here, we want to create a global color with these. So I'll double click with all of them selected, turn it to global color and click OK. So now this is the base color. We want this to be 85% red. Okay, well, what part of the die do we want to be 85% red? Well, the darkest area like this. So we'll go to color, we'll punch in 85 like that. And now we have that tint. Can't remember what we did, 60 there. So we'll do 60 here. The next level of shapes on the die, this will all be 60. So it's getting progressively lighter as it's getting closer to the surface that's closer to the light source. This one will be 30. And we'll just apply a 30% tint. Now, you can't do tints if they're not global colors. You have to use global colors in order to tint. And I use tints all the time. They're awesome. Now, there's a lot of way you can explore color in Illustrator. The recolor tool, if you select any shape, let's say it's this die over here, this the recolor tool. It has generative recolor now in it where AI is injected. But bottom line, if all you do, in my opinion, it doesn't go any faster than me just doing it manually. I enjoy doing color exploration, so I still do it like this, where I kind of explored a bunch of different colors, what would work good together, but because cows and farms are more natural, I thought brown went with it, and since it's going to have chocolate milk, kind of goes with that too. So I kind of like doing my own exploration. If you want to use generative recolor, you want to use the recolor tool, that's great, but I still enjoy the process of just thinking on my own and coming up with colors and tweaking with them. Now, that said, all of these still are raw colors. So if I click on this and I click on this color here, you can see it's a global color. If I double click into it, you can see we have global turned on. And the same one with this one. If I click into it, you can see it's a global color, but it's still a raw color, meaning if I use this to print and it gets sent to a printer, they have nothing to compare it to. There's no universal system that it's applied to. So if I click on this one, if we go down here on this one and I double click into this, notice we have a Pantone color. So it's part of the Pantone system. So it's a color that's going to be universal, and a printer will know what it should look like because they can look this up in a reference book. That's the importance. So if we go here and I go here, you can see I don't have a color chosen for this. So what I would have to do is I go into my open swatch library, go into the color books, and then this is where I'd have to pick a Pantone color. But notice I don't have my Pantone colors loaded in here. And you might have a subscription to Pantone, and you would have to load your old book files into the new Illustrator. Now, Illustrator says we no longer support Pantone, and Pantone says you have to have a subscription now in order to use Pantone colors. Neither one of them is telling the full story. I don't pay a subscription fee. I don't want to. I've saved out all of my colors in their own library here, so you can see all my colors showing over here, and these are the ones I use. And this works great. I don't have to worry about dialing in or finding a color. If I select one of these here, I can go here. You can see this is Pantone 550, and I can find my colors this way. But actually, I have them loaded on my workstation, and this is where you put those files. So this goes back to when I bought my color books in 2017. I'm not going to pay a subscription when I can still utilize them. So just utilize your Pantone colors still. And if you don't want to pay a subscription, here's a way you can get around it. Go to eBay. People are selling their older Pantone books as if they don't work anymore. They totally work. I still use them on print production projects. And I'm going to show you those in a little bit. So you can buy them for cheap, and then you can search online and you can find these Pantone ACB files that reference those books. Now, these aren't going to do you any good on their own. You need to have a book you can reference so you can see what it's actually going to look like in the real world. But I just want to call that out because Pantone and Adobe both don't really tell people the full story. And that is, yes, Illustrator doesn't support it because they got lazy and didn't keep up with adding the new colors Pantone added. And so they just said, you know what, we're not going to deal with that anymore. But I still use it within Adobe Illustrator, and so can you. So for this project, Tactic Action, we have the black. We have Pantone Black CP, Pantone 1235. And I like to use the Color Bridge books because it matches spot color equivalent with the process color equivalent. So Pantone 1235 CP, Pantone 1235 C, and it also lists the hexadecimal and the RGB values. And when I'm working on a project like this, I try to name it, instead of just calling it black, I kind of go with the theme. This is a role-playing game, so I called the black, Black Soul, gold, Gold Goblet, red Dragon, blue Potion, and Orc Green. These are all secondary colors here. But the Pantone Color Bridge book is just great. This book lists, again, the CMYK and the spot side by side, so you can see exactly what it is, and gives you all the information that you can set up your final art files to be precise. Here's all the ones for Moo Milk using the same process from the Color Bridge coded book, and highly recommend it. Just makes your life a lot easier so you can still use these Color Bridge system within Illustrator. Just install it manually. And I've included all that information in the exercise files so you know where to place it, whether you're on a PC, whether you're on a Mac, and that way you don't have to pay a subscription. Let's jump into stage 4, and that is present designs and creating additional assets. So I want to show you the comps that I presented and kind of the format I used to make those presentations. I try to keep the process simple. I have both a vertical and a horizontal 8.5 by 11 format I use, and just depending on how many assets I want to show them in the presentation determines whether I use a vertical or a horizontal. In this case, I used a horizontal. So here's one of the directions where I have a vertical format here, I have a horizontal here, I have an alternate format for a horizontal here where it takes the brand mark and kind of locks it up as part of the typography. And then the way I worked in the dice into their overall brand system is I made it a secondary graphic as one of the panels, their brand mark as one of the panels within the 20-sided dice. I tend to show them reverse examples down here on a colorized or photographic background so they can see how it would work in that kind of context. Here's another direction. This one again, the brand mark itself, the host shape that is, takes up the perimeter shape of a 20-sided die. Even though you don't see all the sides, I have kind of a monogram within that, and it locks up with the typography as shown, and also the secondary brand mark and reverse examples. Here's the third one that I presented, all the same type of assets I'm delivering, and the final one I presented. Now, this was the direction they ended up going with, and so this is where you want to think, once they settle on something, you want to start thinking, what other assets could I do beyond just the straightforward logo, whether it's the logo mark, it's the vertical, the horizontal. I've already done a little bit of that using the secondary graphic to create a brand mark from. That's great. It's not the primary. The primary would be these two on top. This would be a secondary brand mark here. That's great. So always be thinking like that. But if you don't want to present like this and you think it's a little too straightforward, you can do a more compelling thing. And I want to show you one feature that a lot of people don't really know about in Illustrator. And it's going to help you create what I call a brand grid. If I take this shape here and I want to go to Object, I'm going to go down to Path, and we're going to go, where is it? Oh, there it is. Split into grid. It's going to open up this. And if you've never used this before, this can save you a lot of time if you need to set up coordinates on a certain size and it figures out all the math. So maybe on this one, on the amount of rows, I want 4. On the amount of columns, I want 5, like that. The gutter, this is the space in between these shapes. And by the way, you can turn on preview as you're going, so you can see how it's breaking it up into these square kind of cubes. Then I can go, well, the gutter, I don't know why they call it a gutter. They should just put gap because that's what it's creating. Kind of makes sense. But we'll go 4, and we'll go 4 over here, and you can see it adds those gaps in there, gutters, whatever you want to call it, like that. And that's fine. And then you can click OK. So this is how you can quickly create and break up a single shape into multiple shapes. And then it's pretty easy. Remember that part I told you for Pathfinder under the option menu, under Pathfinder options, make sure you have redundant points turned on, because if I create this shape and overlap it with this shape, I can select these two. Maybe I want the top left quadrant of this brand grid just to be focused on one of the logo designs, maybe the vertical logo. I can select all these and I can go Unite. Notice it gets rid of all those extra anchor points. Maybe I want to focus on one of the horizontals down here like this, and I can go ahead and Unite. And it's an easy way to create a brand grid. You can do any kind of shape or the amount of rows or columns you want to create whatever you want. So brand grid is a really great way to present. So this is how you create a grid. Now, this is how I present a grid. Here's an example of taking tactic action. I'm showing them all the assets I created for the presentation, both the vertical, horizontal, secondary brand mark with the dice and logo type embedded in it. But I've gone beyond that. And this is where showing them kind of like a real world context. Maybe they're going to do an ad in a role-playing game magazine. This could be the ad. And by the way, these were great photographs that a D&D guy who creates all these environments for his game takes a lot of really cool photographs and let me use those. So really appreciate that because it makes it look more authentic because they're actually RPG games. So this is how maybe an ad looks, or this is how they could do merchandise with this logo, or here's another promotional type graphic, or this one. You can showcase the colors, break it down, showing them what the process black color is, what the secondary color is, and what the secondary or the second color in their primary brand colors, and then the secondary brand colors. So it's a good way to present, to kind of let them see how they can use it and how it can work and live in the real world. So that's always a great thing to do. And the feature about breaking up your own grid and creating it is easier than it's ever been using the feature I showed you. So as you start thinking about all the elements, so here's all the primary brand elements for tactic action. This top row up here, these are all the process-oriented assets. These are all the spot-oriented assets. We have black and white down here with a tint within the brand mark itself. Those are great. We also worked out reversed formats, and that includes the colored versions and the one-colored versions. These knock out on a colored, dark, or photographic background. And then I started working out other assets like a brand badge, taking the brand mark, working out, and badges are more of a narrative-based design where you can tell more of the story. We have a lot of the mission statements from this business: strategic adventures, legendary monsters, and captivating stories. And we worked it out in full color, black and white, and a grayscale option. And of course, on reversed, we have full color. Almost, this could also be a sticker, one color using one of the brand colors and just a knockout to the darker photographic background. Gaming usually uses a lot of icons. We created a system of icons, both in CMYK, spot, black and white, and of course, reversed options is shown here. And of course, we're utilizing all the brand colors. But another great thing to use is to come up with brand patterns. And so that's what I want to show you, how easy it is to create a pattern now, especially an object-oriented pattern. We're going to take this secondary graphic here. We're going to select it, go to Object, go to Repeat, go to, go to Pattern, and go to Make. It'll bring us into pattern mode. You can see it's already tessellating a pattern, but this doesn't work that well. So we're going to go here and we're going to select the hex by row down at the bottom because that's the same shape that our mark is, like that. You can see how it snaps together. We're going to go up here and click on the pattern tile tool. That'll give us this bounding box. And this is where we can, if you hold the shift key down and the shift and option key down like this, you can create it'll symmetrically compose this tool, and then you can just figure out how far you want to pull it out. I think somewhere right about there, maybe a little less. We'll go down a little bit. We'll go right about there. Let's try it one more time. Yeah, something like that. And so I think that pattern would be a good one. Now, I don't want this to be black. I want this to be white. So we're just going to go ahead and click the color. Oops, we have to select the artwork to do that. Click the color white. Now you can't see it. That's okay. It's still there. We'll just name it. And on this one, I'll go TA pattern 1. And to get out of this, you can go up here in the navigation. It's almost like isolation mode, and you can back out of this, or you can just hit the escape key. It'll take you back to the artboard like that. You can see we have our pattern swatch is right here. It just looks white. We're going to select this shape. We're going to go to the appearance palette. Let's go ahead and pull this out over here. You can see it has the fill of one of the primary brand colors here. I'm just going to add another fill to this same object we have selected, this rectangle, and instead of that color, we're just going to apply the pattern here. Now that's pretty big. A pattern will be however big you create it, that's how big it'll fill. If you want to adjust that, just make sure you have the pattern fill layer selected in the appearance palette. Double click on the scale tool. Deselect transform object. We don't want the object to transform. We just want the pattern within it, and we want it to be uniform. So we'll select this, and we're going to go like 70%, something like that. We can check it out. I think that looks good. And we'll click OK. So that's how you can create a brand pattern, and this would be another asset a client could use. Now that's how you can quickly make what I call object-oriented patterns, meaning they're not intertwined and it's not very complex. Now you don't even have to do it the way I showed you. If you think like a bounding box, this would be a bounding box. Anything that goes off on the bottom or the right in this case are going to come in on the right and come in on the top. So if I select these two items that are outside of the bounding box, select the bounding box, and I'm going to clone these, Command-C, Command-F, and then I'm just going to slide this bounding box up here and snap it here. Notice they're coming in at the top right where they should be. If you learn this principle, you can create any pattern you want. So we're just going to select the bounding box and these shapes. I'm going to drag and drop this right into our swatches palette. Deselect, you can see it right here. It's created a pattern swatch by default. I'll go in here and we'll just name this TA pattern full color. You can name it whatever you want, but we're going to go back to the tile tool, and I'll pull this out like this. We're going to use this bounding box to do the registration. So I'll pull this down till it snaps to the top. I'll pull this up till it snaps to the bottom. I'll pull this in till it snaps to the left, and I'll pull this in till it snaps to the right, like that. And now we have a full color pattern. I can select the bounding box because we don't want that embedded and just delete it. Now that we have this, we can go back to the artboard by hitting the escape key. I can select this shape now, add another fill color to this above it, and then just fill it with our new brand pattern. And that's how quickly you can create a brand pattern asset, which is really cool. So again, if you're going to present a brand system, you can show all of these elements together. So this is where that brand grid, and obviously I wouldn't create all of these assets until they picked a direction because that's a lot more work. But it looks great together, and you can see how this works and communicates as an entire system for one identity. So it works really great. So here's Moo Milk. These are all the CMYK spot black and white. And of course, all the reversed versions that work on a dark or colorized or photographic background. Let's move into the final stage, and that's delivering final artwork and brand style guides. So let's take a look at the first thing, and that's for Moo Milk here. I'm going to open up the assets export panel here because we're going to be utilizing this. And this is how I'm going to get all of my, let's go ahead and close that. There we go. I'm going to go ahead, and if you see, I have all the color ones, and these are, not only do I deliver final vector art to clients in all the various formats, whether it's color, black and white, spot, and reversed, I provide all of those in vector format files and all the color formats, CMYK, spot, black and white, and RGB. But I also provide high resolution raster images because a lot of businesses that all brand, and by the way, I don't do any of this when I'm working with the big agency. I just deliver the final design and they do it using their own proprietary service. These are my own clients, the way I do it here. These are high resolution PNG and JPEG versions of each of the assets so they can use them in QuickBooks or Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, or maybe they're invoicing. They can use that, or creating a little flyer for their business. So I always try to provide those in high resolution format, and that's what we're going to export out here. And you can see here's all the color ones on the top, the black and white, and I have them here in the export already. So we have, and the naming standard I do is, in this case, since the name's Moo Milk, I simplify it to logo _ color 1. And then this is the same name, just color 2, color 3, color 4. Then we have here, it goes the same naming standard to logo _ black and white 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can see all those showing up here. And if I turn on this layer, you can see we have all the reversed assets, and I have the color ones here, logo reversed 1, 2, 3, and 4. The only ones we haven't added are these. So I'm going to go ahead and add these. So I'll select it and I'll just add the first one. We'll add the second one. We'll add the third one, and we'll add the fourth one. Now, there's services out there that you can subscribe to again. I just don't want to pay another subscription for something else. And this would be reverse 5. I'll just select it, copy, paste it, and I work this into my quote when I quote a project just to cover my time to do this. But it's not hard. I have a system set up where it's pretty easy to, oops, I accidentally added type there. We don't want to do that. And now I lost track. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Reverse 8, not 9, 8, like that. So once we have these, now I can export these out. Now I've exported out all the other ones already. I just wanted to show you how you move it in. And right now we want to export it out as transparent PNG images. You wouldn't want to save these out as JPEG because all you would see is blue. You wouldn't see white because JPEGs don't have transparency. So that's why I provide a PNG format as well. So we're going to select all these because these are the 4 I want to go ahead and export out. And by the way, whatever file or folder that is that you have this file in, or whatever file you're working on, you're doing this, it will save it by default to that folder, which is kind of handy. If you don't want it to save there, of course, you can tell it to save to the desktop. But in terms of the resolution, I want to set my resolution really high. So right now I have it on resolution, but I don't want 200. I'm going to save these out at 400 ppi using PNG 8, and I'll just click OK. It'll say, where do you want to save it? It's defaulting to where I open the file. That's fine. So I'll choose that. and it saved them successfully. You'll get this notice that pops up on the screen. So that's how I save out raster formats of all the brand assets. I just showed you 4 that I did. I'm not going to walk through all of them, of course. And now we'll just go ahead and close this. We don't need to save it. And we're going to go to this because we're done using asset export. I also provide all of the assets, obviously, in vector format. And this format that I'm saving out here is the RGB color format of all the assets. If you look at my layers, and this is key, RGB1, RGB2, RGB3, RGB4, and RGB5, because the script that I'm going to use is a custom script I had made, and it takes the file name, once again, that naming standard, TA logo. It'll save out each of these layers as their own AI file, and it will name them TA logo underscore whatever the layer name is here, whatever the layer name is here. So that's how this script works. So let's go ahead, and we're just going to let a script do what a script does. So we'll go to script, we'll go to save layers as AI. This is the script. It's included in the exercise files. And I'm just going to run the script. It'll say, hey, you want to make sure you saved it in case you made changes. They won't be there after it runs the script. I add this worked into it. That's fine. Continue. And it does what a computer does. It just computes. And all those files are saved out. We can go ahead and close Illustrator. We'll go to the desktop here. Here's the folder that file was in, TA logo, and it's saved out TA logo 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And on a Mac, you can quick view just to see all of those saved out as their own independent files. Now what we need to do is put them in their appropriate folder. So I'll go ahead and open up my final brand assets. You can see under RGB, we have the logo files, we have the badge, icons, logos, and patterns. So all of these are those assets, but under the RGB color type. And now we're going to drop these 5 into the color for the logo, like this. And now we have everything needed in here. So once again, my final assets for any project, in this case, all the logo assets are here, and all the folders within this logo folder are black and white assets, CMYK assets, reversed assets, and spot assets. So it gives them everything they need. Now I separate RGB from the print variety files in its own folder, and those have all the same assets. It's just all RGB. Then the patterns, I only provide these in CMYK unless they request RGB, then I'll set those up as well. Icons, again, all the various formats for the icons. The badge, same thing, all itemized. And then the high-res images, both in this case, the badge and the logo files, and they get both JPEG format and PNG format in each of these. So that's how I work all of this out, and it's worked really well for me, and I don't have to pay a subscription. That's what I like about it. Okay, let's dive to Moo Milk. Let's go to this folder because this is the folder that we saved out all the raster-based images for the reversed versions. You can see those here. You can see it'll show a folder that shows the PPI. We'll open up these assets here. We'll go to the high-res images because all of these will be placed, let's see, will be placed inside the reversed folder. We have the first 4 we had already done. We'll just select these, drag them over, and drop them into that. So now we have all the reversed for all the high res, and the same deliverables on this, slightly simpler, not less complicated project, CMYK, black and white, reversed, all the RGB assets categorized, and the spot as well. So that's how I set up all the final assets. We obviously wouldn't need that. I just delete that, and let's close the folder. So all of those assets are documented in a style guide. And whether it's a small business, such as Moo Milk, this is a more simplified style guide where I have a cover. I usually use a thematic image. This one, I love the cow just staring at the viewer. I thought this worked well. And then I just move into covering all the assets. So we have all the full color, the spot, black and white. It gives all the call outs. It reminds the owner or the brand manager or marketing director for this business what each format is ideal for, so they know what to give to a vendor. I usually recommend they give the vendor the PDF itself, and then they can tell the client or the business, that is, what they need them to send, and then that corresponds to the assets that I organized. Here's all the color, all the spot, all the black and white on the additional versions, additional layouts, and then of course the reverse formats of both the color and the knockout. And I always try to do a back cover that has one of the primary brand graphics, their URL, a slogan if we develop one for them, and a nice plug for my studio. Let's take a look at Tactic Action, because this is more of an example of a more complex brand. It might be a bigger company with more working parts. Therefore, it needs more of a guide to help keep their brand intact. I usually start off with a nice thematic cover utilizing the brand assets on the cover. The second page is like a mission statement just to set forward the tone of who they are, where they want to go and what they do. And then I first cover the brand colors, because everything that follows will utilize them, and that's what's documented here. Then I go into all the assets and I break it down by category, process, CMYK logos. I don't show RGB within the brand style guide. I have it listed with the colors, of course, if we go back here, but it's not needed because it would just be redundant to everything else I'm showing. But they're, as I state, their equivalents are included in the brand asset files. So I just break down each of the assets, whether it's CMYK like this, then it moves into spot. This had so much nice photography, so I use photography on each section. Here's all the spot equivalent assets. This moves in to the black and white. And again, all the black and white assets is shown here. Then we move into the reversed, and of course, all the reversed assets, both full color and the simplified one color knockouts, all the various types of assets and how they work on a dark colorized or photographic background. Then we move into brand patterns, and this is where I just document the various brand patterns that have been created for them. And this one had 4 patterns, which is a lot of fun. And then I get into the part that a lot of designers would look at and go, well, of course, you wouldn't want to do it like that. This isn't really for designers. This is for vendors. This is for interior, non-creative people at a company or a marketing director. To make sure they're not messing around with the brand aesthetic that's been established. So these rules might seem ridiculous, but I could tell you some stories about all the things I've seen done with deliverable files to a client that doesn't have brand management. It's really needed. So clear space, keep a nice buffer around it. Don't add effects. That's not part of the brand styling. Don't obstruct the brand identity. You might put a badge on it or whatever. Obviously, don't change the brand colors. Don't mess around with transparency. Don't distort. Don't add more type. Don't make alterations like this offset kind of shape. Don't reorient the brand. Keep it the way it's shown in the guide, and don't edit the artwork like some monstrosity is shown here. Now, of course, you're looking at this and I go, well, I'd never do that. Well, it's not about a designer. A designer tends to build these senses as they're developing their skills as a designer to avoid them. but there's a lot of vendors that get sloppy. Well, I'm going to squish this so it makes it fit easier. And so these are purposely absurd so they pay attention to it. So these are all the rules. And then, of course, brand typography. Oh, let's go back. Brand typography. This is where I like to pick, and I usually focus on picking typefaces that are either part of Adobe fonts, so they can get them there, or Google fonts, so they can get them there. Now, if I have to use a custom foundry, then I put that in here so the company can incur the expense to buy that font that goes with the brand aesthetic established. So I think that's important. So all this tells them where they can go, how they can access it, and they can utilize these fonts to support their overall brand in whatever print collateral or marketing context they're working in. And of course, the back cover, the URL, slogan, and a nice plug for my studio. So a systematic creative process doesn't need to be limited to just brand-centric design. I just use that to communicate the various stages of development and design. You can apply this type of systematic approach to any creative project to ensure you work out great concepts and then build them out in vector form with precision and care. The exercise files for this movie, as with all the movies on this channel, can be accessed via the link in the description below the video. Doing so helps me develop new content. If you like this channel, please subscribe, give the movie a like, and comment on my content if you want to, because I always respond to them, and share it, or even better, become a member. All this helps me to grow the channel and create more unique content to help the design community improve and grow. Until next time, thank you for watching People Love Process. And as always, I really do mean it. I hope this content helps you to improve your own creative process.